Welcome back to another memory. In this one, we're going back to 1994 again, as we did in an earlier episode. This time, Unix in a nutshell. This is the Solaris 2 and System 5 Unix command reference book, which is essentially the man pages printed out in paper form with a little bit of extra explanation going on. That basically took every standard Unix command available at the time and put it into book form, which was incredibly handy because in 1994 is when I first started using Unix. I started using it at GMI Engineering and Management Institute, now Kettering University. When I was a student there, I had my classes that used this in my very first semester as a freshman. So this book I bought probably in my first week, maybe first 2 weeks at university. It was with me all throughout university, and I used it so much, and it became my first real computer book. And for those of you who know me, I at one point had a massive library that I'm still in the process of unloading after all these years. I amassed between 1994 and about 2001 a library worth between $50,000 and $100,000 on every subject you could possibly imagine. I spent so much time collecting books, and this O'Reilly title from 1994 is the book that started it all for me. I did have computer books when I was younger, but they were always like the book that came with our computer. So like the Amiga Basic book that came with your Amiga computer. Very, very simple books. This was the first time that I discovered that there were books you could go to a bookstore and find actual information about computers and programming and shells and that kind of thing. And so it really changed my life and began how I started learning and researching about IT and programming at that time. And very, very influential for me. It is a book I've kept only for the purpose of keeping on the shelf and saying that's my very first computer book. It's been very special to me, but not something that makes sense for me to store long term, and certainly no one else is ever going to care about this book, and it's a pretty good size item to keep only for nostalgic reasons, especially when it's not like involving family or anything like that. So this is going to go. I am sad to give it up. I have kept it for 26 years, 26 and a half years at this point. I have carted this around everywhere, but it just doesn't make sense. And O'Reilly does still publish this. It is now Linux in a nutshell. I have owned several versions of that one. All of those have gone because they didn't have any nostalgic component to them. And there's really no reason to own a book like this today. All that stuff's online, far better ways to get it, so it doesn't really make sense. It is interesting, though, just how important books like this were in the late 90s. Today, we would never think of having a book as a command reference, but back then, this was the most valuable thing that I owned.